Judgment going into that timeline of events that has led us to where we are today, and quite a lot to go through. But I don't know, I will hear from our producers if the first person we're speaking to is available for us now. All right, not yet, but we're hoping to speak to Mmusi Maimane, who posed that question in Parliament on the 6th of November 2018 to the President, that has led us to where we are now. But let's just take you through that timeline at this moment of events as they happened, leading us to where we are now. That 6th November 28th parliamentary session, where former leader of the Democratic Alliance, Mmusi Maimane, poses a question to the President about that 500,000 rands donation, to which the President says that it is a payment to his son for consultancy work, but then comes back 10 days later to come and refute that, saying that with new information, his information is changing. But on the 16th of November, the President sends a letter to the National Assembly Speaker, Thandi Modise, to correct his response, saying that with new information presented, the money he has since determined that the money was a donation to his campaign. And then the conversation moves on. On the 23rd of November, the Democratic Alliance leader, Mmusi Maimane, lodges a complaint with the Public Protector against Ramaphosa. So those are the two dates, the 16th of November and the 23rd of November, that we'll be speaking to Mr. Mmusi Maimane about, and his sense in terms of the outcomes today. The 26th of January 2019, a similar complaint lodged with the Public Protector, this time by Floyd Shibambu of the EFF against President Ramaphosa. And then on July 2019, the Public Protector releases that 105-page report into the donation, and those findings that the Justice Jafta finds that she was extending herself on. And then following that, August 2019, the Gauteng High Court orders the sealing of the CR17 campaign bank records during a review application of the Public Protector's report on the matter. And then we move on to March 2020. The Gauteng High Court sets aside the Public Protector's report and a decision to investigate money laundering allegations into Ramaphosa's 2017 ANC campaign. On the 26th of November 2020, the Constitutional Court reserves judgment in the Public Protector versus Ramaphosa matter. Public Protector Busisiwe Mkhwebane defended her decision to investigate the CR17 campaign funding and was appealing the decision that set aside her report during that year. Also, just continuing with a look at events that brought us up to this stage, the 16th and the 17th of March 2021, the EFF approaches the Gauteng High Court to have the bank statements unsealed. The CR17 committee counter-argues that the documents were never before the court and that the right to privacy of the donors should be protected. And we'll continue to go through this timeline, but let's bring in now the former leader of the Democratic Alliance, Mmusi Maimane. Thank you so much for making time to speak to us today. Ordinarily, I don't like referring to you as the former leader of the DA, but in this regard, it applies because that's what the conversation is about. Justice Jafta says the evidence gathered by the Public Protector did not establish willfulness on the part of the President in answering your question on the 16th of November 2018. Are you happy with this outcome?
Good morning, and thank you so much for having me. We respect the judgment that has been handed down. I think what remains factual and true is the fact that a donation was made. So that's the first fact. The second is that we cannot deny the fact that Bosasa have had a history of being able to bribe various politicians, especially, or make donations to various politicians who were in the ANC at the time. And the President, it's been established that that doesn't change. But ultimately, when we look at what the Public Protector was meant to investigate or not investigate, the judgment is correct. I only asked the very fundamental question, which is whether was it willful misleading of Parliament, and therefore I respect the outcomes of the court. I would urge that still a question remains as to whether is it appropriate for a president to receive a donation to their campaign by a company that got so many tenders from the state itself. It maintains the triangle of corruption whereupon ultimately you get a politician who gets given donations by a private company, and that private company gets many tenders from the state. And I think that triangle, if South Africa is going to win a war against corruption, needs to be broken down.
Just take us back a bit into the time in between the 16th of November and the 23rd of November, where initially you asked that question and then a decision process ensued where you decided you're going to lodge a complaint with the public protector. What kind of conversations were going on within the Democratic Alliance at that time that led you to that decision to lodge the complaint?
Well, as leader of the opposition in Parliament, the only time you really get to effect accountability on the president, which is afforded for in the Constitution, is through a question and answer session. So that was the first job. I was certainly not going to hide Mr. Ramaphosa from accountability because he's the head of state and we deserve accountability we deserve for him to be held accountable. Secondly, it then became important and when you had two conflicting statements. The first was that he said the money was to his son, and then the second he said the money was to his campaign, that in fact both those matters needed to be investigated because ultimately you can't say one thing one week and another the following week. Thirdly, I think given that, we knew that the only way to investigate the Executive Ethics Code was to go through the Public Protector's investigation, and therefore that is something that we had to do. And then lastly, I agree with Chief Justice Mogoeng in his argument that, in fact, in this instance, if you receive money for a campaign, even if you don't know what that campaign is, it does in many ways constitute personal benefit, and that requires further investigation. So much of the conversation were really about accountability, effecting accountability on the president, and I think that regardless of the fact that the public protector erred in an investigation, the facts of this issue still don't change.
You said you lodged the complaint, but what are your thoughts? Do you have any thoughts which the Justice has just, as you say, on behalf of Justice Mogoeng, just set out the points of how the investigation was carried out? What are your thoughts about the manner in which the public protector carried out her investigation?
Look, I think the office of the public protector needs to be held at the highest esteem, and when many judgments of this nature find that the public protector has not followed proper process in terms of investigations, then I think it diminishes the stature of that office, because the great difficulty is that today we are speaking about President Ramaphosa, tomorrow it will be the Minister of Transport, and the very respective judgments that have been handed down by the public protector. South Africa upholds this office and affords it high esteem in the Constitution. And when judgments are being turned down against it in the public protector, in the record that it has been, it really becomes a challenge, because in a country that is facing serious corruption and where citizens can only make complaints about corruption or misuse of public funds through the public protector, I think this must be a place of real concern for us as the people of this country, and that ultimately we need to ensure that that office is capacitated to investigate properly so that we don't see a record of these kind of judgments being coming against it.
Of course, this is a legal decision, but politically, legally, the president being said to pay costs to Amapungane, but politically, there's a need for greater accountability. How will the politicians be dealing with this Constitutional Court response?
Well, I think more than anything, it speaks to the very basic issue in this country, that we have a president who is elected inside a party and feels the need to spend 400 million rands convincing 4,000 people. Effectively, it cannot just be T-shirts and marquees. In my humble opinion, that most political parties spend 400 million rands on a national campaign. How is it that in the ANC, to be the president must be 400 million rands? I find that something that is not correct. But more than anything, we cannot be discussing ANC politics. What we need is direct election of the president and direct election of our public representatives. Because then us as the citizens, the people of this country, can know that accountability is felt by us. Because at this point in time, the president is only accountable to their party. And when they come to parliament, which is only 4 times a year to answer questions, even that, as we've seen now this process unfold, we're still no nearer to what that money was used for, how that money was spent, and ultimately, was it appropriate? Did Bosasa get any additional contract as a result of that donation that was made to the president? So I maintain that unless we reform our electoral act, and make sure that people are directly elected, there will be another leader who will come, bribe, manage to make massive donations to their party and get elected and end up in parliament, and ultimately their accountability is to serve their party, not the people of this country.
That one question, you set the ball rolling on one of the most polarizing questions in the country with hashtag CR17 bank statements, trending regularly on social media. What are your thoughts about how South Africans have responded to this conversation?
Well, I think it's one of the great things about our democracy, which is an advantage for many, is that we at least have courts that can make pronouncements that can be respected. We can have conversations that are open. And I wish more than anything that we could enhance transparency even further. That's why I welcome the party funding bills that enhances that transparency. I welcome an opportunity for people to be able to go more than anything. Let's all get to know what the various political principles are doing, because I think it'll be helpful for where this country is going to go. So certainly I celebrate what South Africans are doing. I celebrate that we have transparency. Now we can go further. Let's introduce direct elections so that people can get to know what their political principles are doing.
We hope you can come back and talk to us about your submissions at the Moseneke inquiry, but thanks for your time this morning.
Much appreciated.
Let's talk to Samkele Maseko now. He's been at the court. Samkele, what sort of reactions are coming out on your side?
Essentially, because there is none of those political formations, either the EFF or the Amapungane Investigative Unit for Journalism or President Ramaphosa's spokesperson, neither of them are here. There is no particular reaction in the immediate from those parties. But what we do know is that the Constitutional Court has effectively said that the High Court was correct to set aside the Public Protector's report that the President deliberately misled Parliament, that the President and his family and his son were benefiting improperly from African Global Operations, formerly trading as Bosasa, setting aside that there may be possibilities of money laundering that needs to be investigated in this particular case. So essentially the Public Protector lost this particular appeal to the Constitutional Court, and the only issue that now needs to go back to the North Gauteng High Court is the Code of Ethics of Disclosure, because it essentially says that the Code of Ethics does not compel the President to disclose the issues of the CR17 campaign funds. The Amapungane, where the President was slapped with costs, goes back to the North Gauteng High Court to deliberate on the Code of Ethics of Disclosure at this point in time.
Samkele, thank you so much. Those are immediate reactions coming out from our political reporter there, Samkele Maseko. To help us unpack that Constitutional Court ruling, we welcome virtually legal expert Ulrich Roux. Ulrich, this week it seems like we're going to be, you might as well be a regular. But thank you so much for your time.
Any pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Ulrich, please break down the judgment for us.
Well, I think once again the Public Protector Advocate Busisiwe Mkhwebane has fallen short of her duties. Just to give the viewers a recap of what the court ruled on today. Remember that Mkhwebane released a report in 2019 in which she declared that President Ramaphosa had been dishonest, that he had not disclosed material benefits that he had received in his electoral campaign, and that he had not been transparent with Parliament. The President then took that report of hers on judicial review, and in March 2020, last year, the North Gauteng High Court made a ruling that the Public Protector, in fact, had no jurisdiction in order to reach the findings which she did pertaining to President Ramaphosa, and that she had made material errors in law, and that there was no duty on Mr. Ramaphosa to disclose his bank statements, and that her findings had been based on frivolous allegations and evidence which she claimed had been presented to her. That decision of the High Court was then taken to the Constitutional Court by the Public Protector, and today the Constitutional Court agreed with the North Gauteng High Court's judgment in March last year, saying that the Public Protector had made severe errors in judgment, and that she had not applied the law correctly. So once again, that is in a synopsis, but unfortunately for the Public Protector, she's been found wanting once again, and found that she hasn't applied the law correctly.
How can opposition political parties use this outcome against the African National Congress and, by extension, its president, in that there is a sense of dishonesty, even though it wasn't willful?
Well, remember that we live in a democratic society, where the rule of law is applied by our courts, and where findings by the courts can only be made based on factual and correct evidence being presented to court. So the opposition political parties can, of course, now debate and claim that the Constitutional Court has made an error. We saw the same with the ruling pertaining to Jacob Zuma, with the Jacob Zuma Foundation, and the ANC claiming that the judges were not unanimous in their decision, and that the minority judgment should be followed. But unfortunately, the old notion of if you allege, you must prove rings true. So in the event that the opposition political parties claim that Mr. Ramaphosa was dishonest and was not transparent pertaining to his bank statements and to the donations that his campaign received, then they must back that up with factual evidence, and they must, if they don't have that, then they must lodge and launch the necessary court applications in order to secure that evidence. I think it is a healthy society where political parties obviously challenge each other, but they must remember that they can only do so by using our judicial system if they base that factually on evidence that is at their disposal, and by making use of the court mechanisms in order to secure findings pertaining to those allegations.
Thank you so much for your time this morning.
Thank you.
William Mabi is the national spokesperson of the African National Congress, and he joins us now. Mr. Mabi, thank you so much for making the time. The African National Congress's reaction to this outcome.
Morning and morning to your viewers and listeners. Of course, we respect the Constitutional Court and all the undertakings that they make. We believe that this judgment now has set issues in motion and sought to clarify whatever matters that were before the courts, which the public might have wanted clarity on.
You speak about matters that the public might have wanted clarity on, but what sort of concerns are there or were there with regards to this process from the African National Congress point of view?
Well, Desiree, you would recall that at the time when the matter went public, first through the question that was posed by the former leader of the opposition party, Mmusi Maimane, the president had gone further to even clarify the Speaker of the National Assembly to correct the answer that he had initially given, because as soon as he became aware of the facts, he was duty bound to then clarify those, which shows that the president, in all these undertakings, has always sought to uphold the integrity of the National Assembly.
Now, in terms of the orders given, there might need to be a further clarification of the executive ethics processes to the Amapungane. How do you hope to approach this?
Well, because these are matters before Parliament, we are comfortable with the processes that our representatives in the National Assembly, including the President, have taken to deal with this matter. And we hope that they will further be able to clarify that. You see, the truth never changes. The President has already given a vision, and the vision that the President has given, including the clarification that he has provided, has been accepted by the apex court in the land, which is the most appropriate thing that the President would have done.
Mabi is the national spokesperson of the African National Congress. Let's take you back outside the Constitutional Court in Braamfontein. Samkele Maseko, what's the latest on your side? All right, Samkele Maseko doesn't seem to be ready right now, but the South African government